Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show, and we are glad that you're here. I got to tell you, you're going to know tonight that we are absolute professionals, that we never, ever, almost, but at least rarely, skip a beat. We are so out of sync heading into the show tonight. It'll be a miracle if we get through 55 minutes without
a blooper
without you figuring out that we are maybe occasionally invincible. So we'll give it our best effort. I am joined, as you can tell, in the Hilltop Studios by
I'm a Surefire.
And
I'm back, Uncle Bocce.
Hey,
that's part of the deal. He became fully I'm back about 2 seconds before. No, actually, after we started hearing the same intro that you did. So
that's right.
But we will get her done. The Doc Owen Show is proudly all over the internet, all over social media as Doc Owen Show, DocOwenshow. We have our very own blog, uniquely titled DocOwenshow.com. And we have free apps, emphasis on the free apps for both Apple and Android devices. So the really the best way to link up with us is go to the Facebook page, Doc Owen Show, find Doc Owen Show on Facebook, like that page, and then follow us on Twitter. Then download the free app for your particular device, and you will be totally and forever synced up and aware of when we do live broadcasts, as well as be able to listen to what are called podcasts on an ongoing basis. We have our entire library of shows available on the app, and we are currently in year 5. So I think you can go all the way back. If not, we may have run out of storage, and we may be pushing some year 1 events. But year 1 was interesting. From time to time, we throw it back at you just for fun. It was certainly before Uncle Bocce, and it was even before Ima. So it was a one-man band. And very interesting to kind of go back and listen to, because really the thread of our thoughts have not changed that much. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing, I think. The title of tonight's show is Uncle Tom. No, not the one that you're thinking of. And really it should have been Uncle Tom and Mr. Rogers. And I will tell you, we'll tie those dots together and tie some other dots together, and it's going to be a relatively, not relatively, it's going to be quite a personal show, if you will, because the Uncle Tom is my Uncle Tom, and we'll take it from there. So we always start the show after those. Those are not really advertisements. We'll call them public service announcements, or as they say in the industry, PSAs. We do get those out of the way first. We then start in a very traditional manner. Ms. Surefire gives us an inspirational quote. Uncle Bocce tells us about this day in history at some point in the history. And then I finish it off with a leadership quote or two. So, Ms. Surefire, take it away.
And tonight's quote comes from a place that I've used before but haven't lately. It is brainyquote.com. That's BRAINY quote.com. And tonight's quote comes from a man that most of us have heard of, Robert Frost.
Oh, buddy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he was an American poet.
Mm-hmm.
And his quote is, "A bank is a place where they lend you an umbrella in fair weather and then ask for it back when it begins to rain."
Ha-ha.
Do that one again for me.
A bank is a place where they lend you an umbrella in fair weather and then ask for it back when it begins to rain.
Sounds like a Mark Twain to me.
Yeah, that is kind of Mark Twainy.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
My grandfather always said the best time to go borrow money at the bank was when you didn't need it.
That's true. Yeah.
Just when you don't need it, go borrow it, set it aside, go pay it back.
Yeah.
Words to the wise. Uncle Bocce,
Yes, sir.
got a historical point or two for us this evening?
Yep, we got one. On this day in 1775, Congress adopted the Olive Branch Petition. If you remember back when we were doing history, that was the attempt by Congress to convince King George III to reconcile between the colonies and Britain.
Okay.
Didn't work, but this is the day that they did that.
This is the day that they gave it a
in
try.
1775, 1 year before independence.
Okay.
So we tried to,
Oh, I got a feeling we did. I mean, we didn't just
no,
instantly start fighting.
right.
I think we've proven that from all the information that you've given us. Tonight's leadership, we've kind of varied off of the leadership path in one sense, in that they are all religious focused. A friend of mine in the show gave me this book called God Bless America, Prayers and Reflections for Our Country, and that's what I've been reading out of. This one is about peace and scriptures about peace. This one is Romans 12:18. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. That's from my Uncle Tom. So, Bocce,
Good.
would
Yes.
you are you ready to dive into it, or would you like for
Absolutely.
me to provide some more amusement for the audience?
Well, it's your show, so you can do what you want. But yes, I'm ready.
Well, good.
If you're ready.
Then
Okay.
then you're properly trained. Go.
Okay, tonight is James Garfield. He's the 20th president, and I'm going to try to get through everything tonight.
He also had a cartoon character was-
Garfield the cat?
that was
Yeah,
named after
yeah.
him.
Yeah, it looks just like him, too. No, just kidding.
Wow.
Just kidding. Okay, so this guy, Garfield, is James Adam Garfield. He was inaugurated in 1881, but would not serve for long. Okay? He was assassinated on July 2nd, 1881,
Okay, well, thanks
while
for that.
he was waiting for a train in Washington. Now, he survived the gunshot. However, he got blood poisoning and died a few months later
From
in
the
September.
transfusion?
I don't know. I don't think they even knew what transfusions were back then. So he left us. Okay. So
Wow.
now you understand why I think this is going to be brief tonight. He had a formal education. He started in local schools, and he went to the Geauga Academy in 1949. I don't know much about that, but
No way.
you know Geauga?
No, I know he didn't go there in 1949.
1849.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
And then after that, he went to the Eclectic Institute in Hiram, which is now called Hiram University. And he was
that was a
teaching
good choice of
to
name
help.
change.
To help, yeah. Well, it's in the town, yeah.
Of eclectic?
No, it's in the town of Hiram,
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Ohio.
my gosh.
So he taught to pay his way.
Cheap whiskey.
In 1854, he attended Williams College in Massachusetts. He graduated with honors, and he became an ordained Christian minister and studied law independently, as we find that most of these guys do. And he was admitted to the bar in 1860.
Well, even today, you don't have to go to law school to become a lawyer.
You just have to pass the bar.
You
Right?
can pass the bar exam if you study. You can pass the bar exam and become a lawyer.
There you go. There you
Wow.
go.
How about
I'll
that?
Pass.
Thank you for that bit of information.
I'll
Yep.
pass then.
I'm sorry, I said his name was James Adam. It's James Abram Garfield. Abram, Abram.
I wasn't going to embarrass you on the air. I thought.
Yeah, well, I thank you for that. Let me find my own mistakes. He did have one nickname. He was called Canal Boy. What happened was that I forget at 16 he ran away from home because he had a love for, the water, the sea. He wanted to do something like that.
My kind of guy.
Yeah. So what he did was he worked the canal boats from Cleveland to Pittsburgh, but he wasn't very good at it. So he fell overboard 14 times in a
Decided
short
to give up
period
that way
time.
of life and become president.
Yeah. Then he went back home. So he is from Ohio. He's a Republican. He was 49 when he was inaugurated. He was 6 feet and just a little over 200 pounds. He was a Christian, a disciple of Christ. Was the sectarian that he went to, not the sectarian, the church that he went to. On November 9th, 1831, in Orange Township, Ohio, he was born. Okay, I like this in Cuyahoga County. It's a good, cool name. It's probably an Indian name. He died on September 19th, 1881. Like I said, from the gunshot wound. And he was shot.
You say from the gunshot wound, and that's what you said earlier. Was he assassinated, or
Yes. Yeah.
did he interrupt a robbery at 7-Eleven or what?
No. He was shot by a disgruntled attorney who
who
was
did
not-
go to law school to become an attorney?
Yep.
Okay.
Because he was disgruntled because he was refused a political appointment. So he got disgruntled. He said, "I'm getting this guy," and he did that. His name was Charles Guiteau.
That sound effect you hear in the back is the train that Garfield was on
Maybe.
when he was shot.
Maybe. He actually was shot in Monmouth County, New Jersey, waiting for a train in Long Branch, New Jersey, which is a town where my aunt lived. It's New Jersey. That's why I'm only saying that. Anyway. And he was en route to a reunion at Williams College.
He was at the train station, wasn't he?
He was at the train station.
That's why we're doing that sound effect.
Yeah, there you go. How'd you know that? So this guy, he shouted. There were two parts of the Republican Party back then. One was called Stalwart.
I warned
and
you,
the
folks.
other-
If you were here when we first said hello, I warned you. Go ahead.
And then there was the other section that was really more of the progressive. The stalwarts were kind of like the conservatives, and the other guys, I'll get their name here and said they were more progressive. So here's the beginning of the progressive movement. This is where it got its start.
So the guy that shot the gun was a progressive. We don't know that.
Yes, yeah, because he was in favor of his opponent. Okay, for becoming the
President.
yeah. So
Duh.
he said Arthur, it was the Chester Arthur was the vice president, and he wanted him to get it. That was a compromise. So they had one from the stalwarts and one from the progressives.
Oh, okay.
On another way to whatever as they
Muck
did,
it
they
up is all it
negotiated.
is.
Right. So he got killed. He didn't die until about 4 months older. His resting place is Lakeview Cemetery, Cleveland, Ohio. He was in office for 6 months, from March 4th, 1881 to September 19th, 1881. His salary was $50,000, which is $1.1 million today. He held a few other offices. In 1859, he was elected to the Ohio Senate. He was then engaged in the Civil War, and he fought for the Union and rose to the rank of Major General. And then he got elected to the House of Representatives, where he served from 1863 to 1881. He married a lady named Lucretia Randolph, and they had one less than the former president. They had 7 children, two
my.
boys, two girls, and the rest 5 boys. So, yeah, they. Now the campaign, there wasn't a whole lot going on, except that the Republican Party was split. Okay, so it took them 36 ballots, and he wasn't even in consideration for the nomination. Yeah, so it took them 36 ballots, and even though he got a mention in every single one of them, they finally compromised and said, okay, this would be a good bargain to get him. So
where were the where were the Democrats when all this was happening?
Democrats were just as bad off. They were just an organization that was dysfunctional. You know.
Okay.
Yeah, they really were. Okay. So
much like today,
they put Winfield S. Hancock against James Garfield. Garfield obviously won. He narrowly won the popular vote, but he did win it.
Okay.
Only by like 7,000 votes. He got 214 electoral votes to Hancock's 155.
Okay.
Okay, and there was one other guy who was in there too, James Baird Weaver, but he was running on the Greenback Party.
Yep. Okay.
Remember that? So that was he got no electoral votes whatsoever.
Right.
Okay. Most of the South went for Hancock, and most of the North went for Garfield. There were 19 and 19 states, but because of New York,
because of populations.
Yeah, because of New York and Pennsylvania, he got more electoral votes. His cabinet was the same guys. He had a real difficulty with the Secretary of State because the Republican Party didn't like this guy. His name is James G. Blaine, and he became not Blaine, but Garfield became very dependent on this guy. That's why he wanted him. He liked him, and pretty much this guy took over just about everything. He did nominate Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert T. Lincoln, for Secretary of War. Okay, no new states joined while he was in office. Court appointments, he had 6. One of them a Supreme Court, the other district courts. So he did get one guy on the Supreme Court. As far as domestic policy was concerned, he spent most of his time selecting his cabinet. You know, just like Trump had a hard time getting. Well, Garfield had the same problem. The Treasury was able to refinance. This is one of the other things. Refinance the 6% interest government bonds. He refinanced them to 3.5%, which saved $10 million annually. So it was about 4% of the overall budget. Foreign policy, again, there's not much that he could do because he was only in office 6 months. They were limited to filling vacant diplomatic positions. You know,
he was 6 months in. He was just putting his team together.
Exactly. So he named a few different people to England, Turkey, and Secretary of State Blaine was so involved in patronage. This was the problem because there was corruption. He had little time to deal with Latin America affairs or the Chinese immigration issue or fishing. He just didn't have the time because he spent all his time giving out, rewards for nothing.
Well, not exactly for nothing, for political contribution.
Yeah. So he didn't really have much of a legacy, except that he was a good man.
So we're told.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't in office long enough to prove differently.
Exactly. But he was around. He was in politics for a long time.
That's the old adage: the good die young.
A couple of quotes that he's remembered by is, "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable." I mean, okay. For the love of country, they accepted death, and the wrinkles must be written upon our brows. let them not be written upon the heart. The spirit should not grow old. And as far as character and personality, somebody by the name of Mary Clemmer Ames wrote that he was a large-framed, large-brained, and large-hearted. His personal character and habits were clean and pure. In a word, James Garfield was a man physically, intellectually, and morally who was an honor to his country.
Well, we
so
can't
he had a good
possibly have anybody like that in the president's office.
Absolutely not. So that's pretty much James Garfield, and of course Chester A. Arthur stepped up and became president.
Okay.
And we'll talk about him next week.
We will? Okay.
Yeah, because that's it.
Well,
Garfield.
6 months
There's
in,
not much.
there's not much to tell.
So I figured I'd combine them and do them all in one, and that's what we got.
So we're going to have a half-hour show tonight. That's good. That's good. There's a lot to do.
Okay, good.
Who are you?
You guys don't know who I am yet? Oh, okay. No, this is Uncle Baci, UNCLEBACI, and I would appreciate it if you call me at Doc Owen Show or email me at docowenshow.com. Uncle Baci at docowenshow.com.
There you go.
Thank you,
Yes.
Uncle Baci.
And welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uncle
I
Baci-
am happy to be back.
Uncle Baci has just returned from what he calls the motherland, New York City
York
and
City.
New Jersey.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't go into New Jersey too much this time, but yeah.
There's still a warrant for your
New
arrest,
York,
isn't there?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we went to the
Run, Baci, run.
yeah. We went to the memorial, the
9/11.
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
I
Ground
did
Zero.
too.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Did you go to the museum?
Yep.
We
That
went.
that they did that so well, but it was very, very somber.
Sure.
Very somber. It should be.
One of the best museums that we've been to in a long time, I think. Emma can correct me. It was the World War II Museum in New Orleans.
That's a good one.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's a good. And then
There's
9/11 would probably be second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is how good the one in New Orleans is
It's two
about
buildings.
World War II.
It's like two buildings.
It's really good.
Yeah, but
And they're
9/11 touches
so-
my
9/11
heart.
is, I mean,
Yeah, that touches my heart.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, because
It was very well done.
If whether you realize it or not, 9/11 and part of probably a large part of the audience does not. 9/11 is how we picked the age group for our audience and how we target our show. I took 9/11 and transposed that to the shooting of JFK and how old I was when JFK was shot. I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And I had spent since I was 11 trying to get to that 18-year-old point of being at the Naval Academy. All right? Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, if that's one of the first times, if not the only time, that's the only peacetime that the Army-Navy game was postponed for a week
Wow.
because of JFK's assassination. All right? So I took that date at 18 and transposed that to 9/11 to create the age range that we created, because that was the one way that I knew to relate to
Yeah.
extreme life-changing events for all the young people out there that were headed in a certain direction. They had their plans. They knew exactly what they were going to do. And then 9/11 happened, and maybe not immediately, but I would submit to you, eventually, everybody had to change. Every young person had to change and adjust to the new world, to what it was like to live with a Department of Homeland Security, to live with all the things, good and bad, that we've had to live with since 9/11. So that's the significance of the event, and the museum to me is then trying to turn around and relate it to something very personal, and then take it out to the audience to say, I feel you. I get it. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. My 9/11 was JFK. You know what I'm saying?
I got you. Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
exactly.
as a matter of fact, when 9/11 happened, I was in my second week of an MBA program, and when JFK happened, I was about to enter my second semester at the Naval Academy. Mm-hmm. And so when that happened on 9/11, I remember quite a few of my classmates quit. They dropped out. They had to do, and it was suggested that I might want to do the same thing. And I'm like, no. I've been there. It was called Vietnam. I am not going to be taken off of my course this time. Whatever it is, I'm going to see it through. And it was challenging. It made everything about it more challenging. So, as long as we're talking personal, yes, the show is about my Uncle Tom. We used to call him our radical Uncle Tom because he is exactly that. My Uncle Tom is my mother's. I'll connect some dots for you after a while, folks. Just sit tight. My mother was the oldest of her generation. Uncle Tom was the next to the youngest. When I was born, my Uncle Tom was 14 years old. And I happened to be, because of World War II, my mother had moved back in with her parents while my dad went overseas to fight the war. Okay? Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, when I was born, my father was missing in action. We didn't know whether he was dead or alive. I mean, I was too young. I really didn't care. But but everybody else in the family seemed to be concerned about it. So I was almost 4 months old when Dad got released from prison camp and found out that he had a son. But Uncle Tom was only 14. He was there. I mean, I was living in the house with him at the time he was a teenager. Mm-hmm. And for the first couple of years of my life, he was quite a figure. I mean, Dad came home, but Uncle Tom was just always there. And he wound up going to Korea. He was a decorated Marine in Korea. After he left college, first of all, he was on a football scholarship to a place called, and I always thought that they were teasing me, that he was a star football player for a little school he was a Millsaps meat eater. That was the name of the football team. Millsaps College in Mississippi, and the name of their team is the Meat Eaters. And wow. Not too long ago, maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, I went to a big hoopla Faldera event over in Mississippi with all my kinfolks, et cetera. And there were a bunch of the Meat Eater football players there that Uncle Tom played with. And I mean, I was like, you guys really didn't call yourselves. Yes, we did. and then he wound up courting and dating a young lady in Mississippi who became Miss Mississippi. And I mean, she was from one of the families, the Kayats, there in Mississippi. And everybody, the story that I got, and all of this I got at the reunion that I went to, he didn't have a chance with this girl. Because, I mean, he was a Millsap meat eater. He wasn't going to Ole Miss. He wasn't going to Mississippi State. He wasn't going to any of the appropriate colleges. He was from Memphis, Tennessee. He wasn't even from Mississippi, And so he didn't have a chance. Well, everybody forgot to tell Uncle Tom that because he wound up marrying my Aunt Edna, and they stayed together for almost 60 years till Edna passed away a couple of years ago, and they were lifelong partners in everything they did. And I'm going to tell you about it in just a second. And she was forever Miss Mississippi. I mean, she was forever looked like she could have stepped out on stage in the Miss America contest and certainly given these young kids a run for their money. Just the way it was. So Tom beat them all out. And all the buds that were there that got beat out trying to court this girl, I met about 10 years ago. They were all at this big event, so they were telling me the stories about my Uncle Tom. When Uncle Tom left, he went off to become a decorated Marine in Korea. which was an event that he really did not like. So he came back and he knocked around at this job, knocked around at that job, and then finally he said, to heck with it, and he wound up enrolling in seminary and became an ordained Methodist minister. At which time, while he was doing that at SMU, he lived with us because we were living in Dallas. So, but after he went through the ministry, was when he really got radical, because it was Vietnam. Vietnam was starting up, and he published a record of all the businesses that supported the Vietnam War, and we were supposed to boycott them. I mean, he would just went, and he never ever took on a church because he thought he wasn't in favor of the church, because he thought churches spent way too much money on buildings and not enough money on doing good for others.
Smart man.
So, well, he
Obviously.
had a church under a tree. He would have a church wherever he happened to decide that's what we're going to do. That's where they'd get together. And he wound up starting one of the largest Methodist worldwide missionaries that still exists today, a thing called Laos. And if you talk to anybody in the Methodist community, everybody knows about Laos. And Uncle Tom and his Miss Mississippi bride's brother, who was very well connected in Mississippi, put this thing together. And he literally, there was a fellow by the name of J. Clement Stone, that if you know anything about philanthropical environments, the Stone Foundation was one of the first to give back and generate and give lots of money to, as a philanthropist. He would not finance Laos, but he did pay for Uncle Tom's expenses for a year. And then he report back in at what he'd done. He bought him a car and paid all his expenses to drive all over the country and help build the grassroots for what eventually became the Laos, the Methodist Missionary Organization. And then, so Tom got that done, and then all of a sudden, he and Edna and their two girls wound up selling everything they had, and packing it down to South America to travel around and be missionaries.
Wow.
Dude. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you married Miss Mississippi and you're going to haul her off to the jungles of South America? Well, there they went.
There they went.
And when he got back, he continued to help build Laos, but he had always wanted a home on the Mississippi coast. All right? So he picked a spot it's just to the east of Biloxi, Mississippi, and right down around Gulfport, et cetera, et cetera. There's a little parcel of land there, just to the east of New Orleans. And if you remember anything at all about Hurricane Katrina, I mean, New Orleans got all the press, but to the right-hand side of New Orleans, which is the worst side of a hurricane,
Right.
is to be on the right-hand side, was Gulfport and Biloxi and Uncle Tom's house. All right? Which, by the way, Uncle Tom built this house with his own two hands. He started when he was pretty close to 60 to 65 years old, and he built this house. I'm sure he had some help from time to time, but he designed it, he figured it out, and he put it all together. All right? None of which he was really trained to do other than what he learned as a missionary, I'm sure. And except his dad was in the construction business, now that I think about that. Granddaddy was a contractor. But anyway, he built this house right down on the shore. And when Katrina came in, all of us knew that, it looked like, obviously it was going to get Uncle Tom's house, so we called Uncle Tom, and he had headed north. He'd, gone back up into the hills, back up to Tennessee, Mississippi, Memphis or something like that. But when he came back home, the houses on both sides of his house were completely leveled. Everything was gone off of the. There was nothing left but a slab.
Yeah.
Both sides of his house. The house across the street was leveled. In other words, right behind him, coming in from the ocean, right on the other side of Uncle Tom, the house was leveled. Uncle Tom's house, not only was it still standing, not a teacup on the shelf was broken.
How about that? Amazing.
Work of God.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Spared him
I think that's fair.
and his family. No other way to explain it. There is no explanation.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's like Katrina came up to the front door, looked inside, and uh-oh.
Yeah, right.
We know this guy, and went around the house. Absolutely amazing. The reason that I'm talking about this tonight is because my Uncle Tom, 87, is failing. That's the only way to put it. He had a stroke a couple of years ago, and then he fell down and broke his hip. And this is not a guy that takes that very well at all. So I talked to him today, and going to make an emergency trip down there. But I felt like he earned the airtime. He was a warrior in every sense of the word. As a Marine, as a football player, I'm sure. As a kid when I knew him, and he was teaching me how to swim. Uncle Tom, I used to have an alligator named Suitcase. I had a pet alligator. My dad was going to keep it until it was big enough to make a alligator suitcase out of. So he named it Suitcase. Okay?
Wow.
We were leaving Memphis, driving back from Memphis to Dallas one time, and Uncle Tom came running out as we were loading in the car. And back in the day, Bocce, do you remember alligator raincoats? Alligator brand raincoats?
Yes.
You do, right?
Very faintly, yeah.
Okay, I mean they were. It was good stuff.
Yeah.
It was
I remember Izod.
Well, it was kind of was down the same category, just a little bit older than Izod. Alligator was the brand of a raincoat.
London Fog.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
It was a cheap knockoff of an alligator.
There you go.
So he came running out, and he had this flat alligator raincoat box, okay, with holes poked in the top. And he handed it to me through the back windows before air conditioning and said, "You do not open this until you cross the Mississippi." So we're heading out of Memphis, and what's in it? What's in it? Don't know, blah, blah, blah. Uncle Tom said I can't open it till we cross the Mississippi. So we go across the Mississippi Bridge and get over on the Arkansas side, and I'm begging Dad to pull over. I got to see what's in this box. So he pulls over, and a little tiny 18-inch suitcase was in the box. He had sent me home with a live alligator, and knowing that my parents would not turn around once they'd crossed the river to get out of Memphis and go back all the way across Memphis to the house, it wound up staying on our screen porch until literally we feared for our lives to feed the alligator because they're not exactly easy to train.
Yeah, right.
So we finally had to call the Dallas Zoo to come get Suitcase. My
Amazing.
Uncle Tom. All right.
That's amazing.
But he was a warrior until the end, except after he went to seminary, he became a warrior in a different way. He was God's warrior in a very quiet, unassuming, but forceful, soft-spoken manner. Really a good guy. Turn your attention to that fellow that was on TV by the name of Mr. Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yeah.
Alma and I went to see the story of his life not too long ago. Was it really the story? It was more the story of his adult life.
Yeah, that's correct. They
Right.
kind of mentioned his past, but just in
He obviously had a
Small talk.
challenging childhood.
Uh-huh.
They mentioned he was sick a lot. He spent a lot of time in his room. He had rheumatoid fever or whatever it was at the time.
Right.
So I mean, he was a very sick child. So he spent
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time entertaining himself because he couldn't come out. So he had to stay in his room. So he would entertain himself with pictures on the wall and, shadows and
Real creative.
making, but very, very creative. And the story about what he became is the fact that he never lost his inner child. He was an ordained minister. All right?
Right.
And his whole thing was ministry to children. To real children. And so that's where it was a wonderful show.
It was.
It was.
The movie about him
movie
was a
was
wonderful
good,
show.
too.
Oh, the movie?
You're
Yeah.
talking about the
I'm
Mr.
talking
Rogers.
about the actual. Yeah.
I used to watch it.
The messages that were delivered in that show are unbelievable. When you analyze it and you listen to how they were put together and why they were put together that way, and what a perfectionist he was about doing it, and not changing lines or titles, or because there was a reason behind everything that he did in terms of the message he wanted to deliver to children. It was him in the show. It was evidently they put it together. Obviously they put it together before he passed away, but they knew that day was coming, and so I guess they started filming the life of, and I was sitting there, somewhat recalling my Uncle Tom, not knowing that I was going to get the call that I got this afternoon. A couple of weeks ago, but it made me think about the similarities and think about the things that you can do if you're not worried. And I've heard this all my life in business. You can get a whole lot more accomplished if you don't worry about who gets the credit.
That's true. Absolutely true.
And it's very, very true. I think it's become apparent to me as I get older in terms of the work of God. And the work of the Spirit and the work of holiness and all whatever else you want to call it. If you don't care who gets the credit and just go about your business doing the right thing day after day, good. The ledger will be positive on your side. So we got some. Bachi, who'd you have in your life that was like that?
Who did I have in my life that was like that? I don't think I had anybody.
No.
No, because
sure?
most of the family before me were all
Italian.
very low. Yeah, but very low education. But I had an uncle,
Low formal education.
Yes, but I had
There's
an
a
Uncle
difference.
Tony who was an entertainer with kids. He just loved.
Was it
He was like the family clown.
Was it a positive message?
Oh, always. It was always laughter.
Okay.
Laughter. Yeah.
And he was Uncle Tony. You were a child when this was going on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he used to come by the house every once in a while, visit my mom, and he'd always bring us, some kind of candy or whatever.
Right.
And he did that a lot. But, yeah, but a mentor, I can't. I had heroes, but I don't remember having a mentor or somebody who was...
Because of the age difference? Because I got lucky enough to be... That's pretty close. 14 years.
Sure.
I got a younger brother that's 11 years younger than I am.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty close age-wise to you
Sure.
for your uncle.
Sure.
That's usually more like a cousin or a brother
Yeah,
or a close friend.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's what you're keying on. But it sounds like Tony was somebody that probably emulated Tom.
Pretty much so. He was
At least with their children's concerned.
Yeah.
Brought him a positive attitude. Or
Right.
emulated Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm small family.
Yeah, small
But-
family, but I would say my parents instilled many good values for me, has
Yep.
made me be able to handle some situations in my life that I've never had to come across. But I would say my parents are just like two pillars. Now I just have one, right?
Right.
But I would say it would be them.
Pretty strong.
Oh gosh,
Your dad was very strong.
My dad was very smart. He had formal education.
Right.
My mother didn't, but she came from people that had common sense, and sometimes common sense can take you very far.
Yes.
Neither one
You
of
know?
neither one of my parents had a formal education. They had 1 year of college, and then all hell broke loose, called World War II,
Yeah.
and they never got back to it. You know.
I was born
but
during Vietnam era.
But that was the point. That was kind of the point I was making with Bocce too. Is I've never been one to think that a lack of formal education doesn't mean you're stupid
No,
by
I mean,
any stretch of the
no.
imagination.
I mean, I had
Right.
one that did and one that didn't.
Well,
So
the audience
it kinda-
needs to understand that. I mean, we've done shows, had interviews with people that are extremely successful that don't necessarily believe in going $100,000 into debt just to get a college degree and a job at McDonald's.
Yeah.
You know,
My mother did go to trade school, but my dad
there you
went
go.
to college.
Like a
university.
secretarial
Yeah.
trade, like an
Yeah.
administrative trade
Like,
school. That was very
trade
big,
school.
very big in the day.
Yeah.
Yep.
She just did it so she could have fun, meet people. She did.
Needed a dancing partner, right?
And she did. She married the man she stood with and his sister's wedding because the grandmothers knew each other.
Wait a minute. We need to know more about this, don't you?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Say it again.
Okay, my mother married the man whose sister was getting married, and she stood in their wedding because her grandmother and his grandmother were friends.
Your mother's grandmother and your
his
dad's grandmother
knew
were
each other,
friends.
and they needed somebody to stand in the sister's wedding.
End of discussion. You gotta love it.
There you go. Yeah.
And at first she couldn't stand
I
him,
can so. Well, that's so what.
but I guess
But Granny says,
but they got married.
whether you like him or not, Grandma says he's the one.
He's
That's
a good
funny.
catch. You better get him.
That's funny. All right. So, what was the name of the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Show?
It was something Mr. Rogers. Oh, yeah.
Something. Mr. Rogers was in the title.
Was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Was that the name of the movie?
Oh, I don't know about the movie. I didn't see the movie. I remember the program.
Oh, right. I don't remember the name of the
It's
movie.
Won't you be my neighbor?
That's right.
Oh, of course. What else would they call it?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some current event. Hopefully,
You're assuming that there's something that has been going on. No, just kidding.
I'm assuming that there's something that's going on that's worth talking about.
Okay.
That's the difference, yeah.
Supreme Court Justice, nomination, etc.
Yes.
Do you, our young audience, not the older crowd, the young audience, do you realize or take into account how significant this is? Just like how significant every Supreme Court appointment is. Because think about it. No matter what goes on, day in, day out, Congress passes this, Senate says that, House says something else, President writes an executive order, blah, 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 blah. Before it actually becomes a long-term requirement of the American people, what eventually has to happen?
It has to be tested in the courts. Is that what you're going for?
There you go.
Yeah.
And when you test it in the courts, if it's a really difficult question, or if the challenge to the law is presented correctly, what court does it wind up being tested in?
The Supreme Court.
9 judges.
The only constitutionally valid court.
9
Yep.
people
Yep.
make a hopefully 5-4 decision, one way or the other, after years and years and years of Bull sugar.
Yeah. Yeah. Justice Kennedy been there for 30 years.
They're appointed for life. They cannot be removed except death or retirement.
They can be impeached, can't they? No?
Good
They're at the
luck.
Supreme Court? Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, I've never heard it happening, but I'm just wondering. Go ahead.
I don't see how, I don't see how it could happen. I don't know what the Constitution says about it, and that's probably important, except that I don't know that it's ever happened, Mr. Historian.
It hasn't.
Or
It
even an
hasn't.
attempt at it.
No.
So this is a very challenging opportunity for Mr. Trump. Not because he's already done it once. He has one, and for a president to get more than one Supreme Court nomination opportunity is a little bit rare, and for him to get two this early in his tenure is rare
Yes.
indeed.
Yes, exactly.
And he happens to be replacing someone that had always been kind of a vote for the more progressive side of the law. There are two distinct types of views of the Constitution. One is as a strict, absolute constitutionalist who believes in the law the way it was written, as written, word for word, no interpretation required.
Right.
There's another view of the Constitution as a living document, that it needs to be interpreted and adjusted according to today's norms
And precedents.
and precedences. So depending on which side of that camp you fall on, you're either a conservative, the folks that believe in the Constitution the way it was written and do it this way and absolutely don't deviate one single bit, or the progressives, which are the interpreters, which are the right now the Democrats of the world. They believe in interpreting it certain ways. Well, this guy that's bailing out, that's retiring, always voted on the interpreter side of the Constitution. And those of us generally more conservative in everything in life believe in the Constitution as it was written. So this particular position can change the direction of the United States law for up
And
to
many have.
25 to 30 years into the future. So our audience and our audience's children will be impacted by this nomination. One person in the entire United States of America, one person, the one person that gets put on that Supreme Court can help decisions that the court faces go one way or the other.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
kind of tough.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, that's kind of tough to pick that person and then hope to God that you've made the right choice.
Well, Kennedy was appointed by Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and assumably a very conservative justice, but
Didn't work out that
it
way.
didn't work out that way.
Right.
Who is that again?
The guy that's retiring.
Oh,
Well, Reagan, yeah.
Reagan appointed him.
the
so
man,
he's
but
been-
which is the man's.
Right.
Oh.
Well, thank you very much for listening tonight. I know it was very personal. I hope it triggered some thoughts in your head and helped you realize some opportunities that you may have and helped you connect the dots to a guy named Mr. Rogers and maybe to somebody, your own Uncle Tony in your family, like Uncle Bocce said. So, it was just something. Front row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.